Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater, and I'm so delighted to be joined by the fantastic Judith Light today to talk about her two series, Manhunt and The Politician, which I think just are such a testament to the broad range that you have as an actor, and wanted to start by talking a little bit about The Politician, because you've worked with Ryan Murphy before, and as a creator and as an artist, he always has such a distinctive tone and style that he comes up with, and he always knows precisely what he wants. And what's the benefit to you as an actor when you're sitting at home with the scripts and preparing to go onto set and developing this character, just having that sense of already of what he has in mind and what he wants to create as you're making character choices?
Hello, and how are you? Nice to see you. Good morning. That's a great question, in that when you know what is wanted from you, what is being given to you, it gives you a sense of the boundaries within which to work and be free. So you're absolutely right. Ryan is a genius in the way that what he is able to do is to let you know what his vision is, what he sees. And then within that, you can expand with all the directors that he puts you to work with, the script that he gives you, the tone, and everything that he does is different. So he gives you the map, the roadmap within which to create. And I've learned so much from him, just watching him as a producer, how he delegates to other people, how he chooses a great team, his hair, his makeup, the down to the nails, the look is so important. So what he does is he gives everybody that template, that map, and that's how everything moves forward.
I also love the way that you've described kind of like finding a character as turning yourself into an investigative journalist for yourself and asking a lot of questions of this character. And particularly for playing this character, Dee Dee in The Politician, what were some of the most useful questions that you found to ask yourself about her and figuring out who she was?
What was it that drove her to want to be in public service? What was it that made her want to connect with the people, and particularly the people of New York? What was her own question about her own sexuality as she matured? Because for people who haven't seen it, there is, and when Ryan called me to talk to me about this, he said, so she's going to be in a throuple. And I said, really? And he said, you okay with that? And I said, honey, I am in. And it really talked about how, as we mature, that we're not dead, and we have all of that kind of passion and joy in ourselves, our bodies, our sexuality. And so those were some of the questions that I was asking myself. What does it mean to her to be in a relationship with two men?
Mm-hmm. And within that throuple that she's in, you kind of see little glimpses of how each of them provides something different for her emotionally. So what was that journey like in terms of crafting the relationship with both of them, and just thinking about the different sides of herself that they each bring out within this relationship?
Well, when you have actors as wonderful as they are, you have the availability, and a terrific director. It was Brad Falchuk who had written some of the Politician, but the discussions, the dialogues with everybody were not so much around what each of them gave her, because the script really, in so many ways, they had written what the dynamics were. It was, how will we be safe doing those scenes? How will we be intimate doing those scenes? How will we be respectful doing those scenes? And we all got together and had a dialogue about how free we knew we could be. And if anybody felt uncomfortable at any moment, somebody would just raise their hand and say, I have to stop. So it was really a question of, those particularly brilliant actors that I was getting to work with that gave me all of what I needed.
Yeah. And there's also such a wonderful comedic tone that you found with Bette Midler. There's about 3 or 4 different comedic tones throughout the entire series. So I was really fascinated by the conversations that the two of you had to find specifically what that rapport was going to be between the two of them with the comedic aspect.
We didn't actually the first day on set that I met Bette, which was the end of season 1, episode 8, we walked onto the set, we looked at each other, we hugged each other. Everybody thought we had worked together before. We had this instant connection. I adore her. And there was a mutual humor between the two of us. There was this respect. And we didn't sort of get in our head and say, hey, let's, do this or let's do that. There was this kind of rhythm that was created. And she's so generous and funny and talented. And what I love about this relationship is that it talks about friendships, long-term friendships, women and their relationships. And within the body of the series, what happens is that they have a rough patch, a very rough patch. It doesn't dissuade them from coming back together and to really expressing the love and the connection that they have with each other. There's one really touching scene where it's almost like just, will I be there for you and will you be there for me? And the answer is a resounding yes. And it's an emotional scene too. So it wasn't just the humor. She's wildly talented. She has an emotional range that is enormous. So anyway, that was a lot of the dynamic that was going on between the two of us.
Well, speaking to their history, there's also that very unique dynamic because it's not just that they have this long-standing friendship, but they've also been cohorts and, have worked together in a very intimate setting that requires them to be by each other's side every minute of every day, continuously for over 30 years. So how did you think about the way that that would create such a unique dynamic between the two of them?
Well, because I have that with certain friends of mine, I know what the feeling of that is. It's not, it's not one of those intellectual things. You're so well versed in this, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. The how we, sometimes if you get in your head too much when you're working. When we were doing Transparent, we had worked with this woman named Joan Shekel, and Joan has this work that she does that enables an actor to create a character, not so much in your intellect and in your head, but in your physical body. She talks about the emotion that rides on the water and the blood of your body. And when you have that with someone, these sort of endless discussions that you can have can sometimes take you out of the experience. And the idea is to be emotionally fluid and flexible and connected with your partner, so that it translates through the screen and into somebody else's feeling outside of you when you watch it. So I used to say to people, you don't watch something, you feel something. And in particular with Transparent, it wasn't that you watched it, you felt it. And that was, without even saying that, that's where all of us were coming from with The Politician. And that was so for me and Ben Platt as well. And you have people that are available, open, wanting the connective tissue. And all of a sudden, here comes the story, here come the characters. And of course, when it's well directed, well written, and everybody else is on the team, it's an extraordinary feeling.
Yeah. Well, that openness that you were mentioning is something that you've really talked about in terms of Ben Platt bringing that as a scene partner. And so what are the ways when you were working on scenes together that he just brings an openness that really lends itself to the work that you're doing with him?
He's just completely present, just like everybody. When we're talking about Bette, when people are worried or nervous or afraid that, thinking about their own ego or their own, how do I look and how am I coming across? And there was none of that on this set. It's just like, oh, I'm here and we're here to do this story. Because everybody, one of the other things Joan talks about is having meaning in your life. And the way you have meaning in your life is through story. Everybody has a story. You have an amazing story. I mean, look at this company that you've created and look at how it came out of COVID. It's this really exciting, valuable story that can be shared with so many people about no, this is what you can do. And that's the same thing with us. You have this openness and you might be nervous or afraid, is it going to work? But when you don't think from that place, magic occurs. Something else happens. And it's an energy that is almost inexplicable because it's experiential. It's not in your head. And that's what Ben brings. It's oh, hi, it's you. I did an interview with Ben for the 92nd Street Y. We had the best time because it wasn't just about the audience. It was about the two of us getting to be with each other and getting to talk to each other. And that's the greatest kind of work, I think, when you watch really extraordinary people work and people who've been in the business for a long time. When you watch them, they have that. And I try to model that as best as I can.
Yeah. One of the other aspects of working with Ryan Murphy that I wanted to ask you about is, it's very notorious with a lot of his projects that you have, one or two scripts at the beginning, and a lot of it comes to you once you're already in production shooting. And so with that in mind, what were some of the most valuable tools that he gave you in understanding your character and this journey that she was going to go on when you were putting her together at the beginning in your mind?
We had a lot of material, and Ryan talked about what the material was going to be. And also Brad Falchuk, we could talk to Brad. And we were able to get pieces of information. And also, if you don't, sometimes you can look at a script and then you can call the writer. There's a real openness with everybody in Ryan's world. And, he has all these, great producers that you get to work with. There's this, so you can say, hey, I saw this in this script. Is that going to lead to something else? And so then they could fill you in as best as they could. I mean, you have to remember, Ryan is working on 400 things at the same time. And so that's what I was saying before about his genius in producing, that he delegates responsibility to a lot of people who he knows and trusts and have worked with him. So when you come into a Ryan Murphy world, you are in that family. And once you're in that family, you kind of know everybody. So you have the availability to say, what is this? How is this going to play out? And where do you think this might be going? But we had a lot of information when we started Politician, because they planted us in the end of the first season. And then we knew a bunch of stuff that we were going to be having when we went into the second season.
Yeah. One of the things I really loved about what you brought into your performance was, with her being a politician who's been in that world for so many years, is you really kind of conveyed that dance that she has to do. Talking of the 92Y, that scene with you and Ben Platt, where they're in a political discourse together, she starts off very soft and gentle, knowing that she kind of has to before she can go in for the jugular and start attacking his policies and the fact that he's very inexperienced and doesn't know what he's doing yet at this point. And so I was really fascinated in kind of the way that you looked at a lot of politicians, particularly female politicians, and the way that they tend to approach a lot of debates and conversations in public, to really kind of think about all those different layers for her.
Yeah, I'm really interested in politics, and I'm particularly in the last 4 years been even more interested in our political dynamics, our political discourse, how we all relate, watching people in New York, politicians in New York, not only female politicians, a lot of them, but, really looking at Nancy Pelosi and the dance that she has to do and how she finesses that, how she holds her caucus and guides them to where she thinks the country needs to go. There are some politicians that are, in certain ways, they're manipulators. And that is not the aspect of the politician that I wanted to bring to Dee Standish. If she had to, she would. But her truth telling is her biggest advantage. So when she literally comes out and says, okay, screw it, I'm going to tell everybody who I am. I'm very fond of coming out stories, and I know Brian is too. So when she tells everybody she's in a throuple and she talks about her sexuality, again, there is a freedom in telling the truth. And any one of the politicians that I looked at, observed, and watched, they were the truth tellers. They were the ones that the people believed and felt safe with. And if you look at somebody particularly like Kamala Harris now and Joe Biden, you can feel their truth telling. You can feel the energy, and it goes back to the energy that I was talking about before.
Was there, with that in mind, was there a difference in the way that you thought about her as a character once she, comes out and talks about her relationship? Because there's this thing that she's been physically holding on to for 10 years, even to her closest friend and ally. And then now she's finally able to release it and let it out into the world. And so there's a real shift in your performance at that point.
Yeah, thank you for noticing that. That was a very big dynamic that I wanted to focus on. Whenever I have talked to any of my friends in the LGBTQIA plus community and they have come out, they talk about the freedom of coming out, how it feels to not carry a burden for all of that time, to be one's authentic self. And more recently, I've been talking to a lot of my trans friends and what it is to be your real, true self in the world, that you're not hiding, that you're not carrying fear, that you're not worried that somebody's going to find out something about you. And so there is this release, which also gives her the possibility of releasing everything that she's held on to about her career and how she is able to, I don't want to give it away in case people haven't seen it, that, I mean, most people have seen it by now, they were going to watch it, but that ability to say, I put my ego aside. I step aside from the thing that I have been pretending to be and becoming the person I truly am. And I think the message of that, not the message, I hate that word. The I don't hate the word. It's just, it feels so preachy and didactic. And it's like, here's the message, it's like, it's that you live your true self. You have there's no other recourse but to be yourself in the world. And there'll be so much more joy, so much more happiness, so much more freedom. And interestingly, what happens is at the end of the second season, you see how giving up everything, revealing everything, brings you something new and brings you a world that you had not necessarily planned for.
I was also interested in the aspects of her as a politician having to be the first to do so many things. And even in the series, we see that, that plot line of she wants to be the first female vice president as well. And every space that she stepped into, she's had to be one of the first people to do that. And how did you think about that aspect of her character and who that would have made her from always having to push boundaries throughout her entire career?
Well, we don't know all of her backstory. I had some conversation with them about that, and that seems to be that has always been who she is, always pushing the boundaries, being afraid, moving ahead anyway, knowing, but a lot of it came from her struggle, her need to be seen, her breaking the boundary for her ego. There's something about letting go of that and wanting to be the first and having to be the first and necessary to be the first that in certain times blocked her way. She was chasing it rather than allowing it to come to her. And all of a sudden, here it is. And it comes to her in this, beautiful way. And, I hope we have a third season, because then you get to see what the dynamics in the throuple were and what they are going to be now. When you work with actors like Joe Morton and Will Sears, you have these, will they come back? Will we have each other to play off of? There's Bette and there's Ben and there's Gwyneth and, all of these dynamic people, to see if, for Dee Dee, if she can hold the letting go and the truth telling and how that affects her being in her political life and what that leads to. I want to say more about it, but I don't know if everybody's seen it. So I'm just sort of like, not going to give it away. If you want to give it away, you can give it away.
I'll leave the mystery in the air, just like you have.
Okay, good.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about Manhunt, and I really respect and love the fact that you made a very specific choice not to reach out to Bobby Jewell to try and meet her, in terms of playing her and capturing her, because obviously, her life was completely turned upside down and she went through so much turmoil and trauma from this experience. And so where were the places that you found yourself looking for details and understanding her? Because there's a lot less footage of her in the news and in the media to look to.
Yeah, there were articles that they gave us. The production team was really specific about that. There was a great piece in Vanity Fair, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. There were certain things that you could look at that where she was on camera. I go back to it. When you do a real person, just like I did in Versace, I feel responsible and respectful of that person and their life. Whatever happened to them has brought up whatever turmoil, sorrow, pain for them. And so I work from an emotional place. So when a script is beautifully written, like it was in The Politician, and also like it is in Manhunt, and you get to work with an actor like Cameron Britton, who plays Richard Jewell, the emotional dynamics are there. They're present. The director guides you with those, and your partner works with you with those. You don't have to always go do all that. You can get as much research as you can, but again, it comes down to the moment on the set with that script, with that person that you're working with and that director, to move that story. And we know the story of, Bobby Jewell and Richard Jewell.
I was also really interested in the journey to the physicality of this character in particular as well, because it's not just something about the makeup, the hair, the costumes that you're wearing. There's also kind of the way that you walk and the way that you move. There's like a stiffness in her hip every time you move around a room, and a lot of choices that you really made. So what was the journey of just embodying that, working with the different departments, working with costume, hair, and makeup, but also the choices that you made as a performer?
You are amazing. You are incredibly observant. So thank you. I feel strongly that every makeup, hair, costume department helps you make the character. You make the character, you create a character as a team. When people say, thank you for this award, I didn't do it alone. You're not kidding. I mean, it is everyone's participation. I said to them that I didn't want to wear any makeup, and that, and they got me this wonderful wig, and those things, again, I go back to, if it's emotional and it's in your body, all of a sudden the physicality can come. It isn't like you say, I think when I walk across the room, I'll have her hip be stiff. I don't think about it like that. It's from all the departments brought together in that moment to create that person. And if I'm not in my head thinking about it, and I'm not worried about how I look, I had a friend write to me and she said, wow, you spent a lot of time in hair and makeup on that one, didn't you? And I said, yeah, right. And she said, and so it's like, it's from within. It's an organic sensitivity and sensibility. That's how it comes about. I can't tell you, I thought, well, I should do this. I didn't.
Was it also just a feeling within in the same way in terms of the location of their house? Because, you know, this is her home that she shares with her son. And then there's that moment where the FBI come in and they ransack the place and they take some of her belongings as well. It's not just his items. And then that really changes her mental state for a lot of the series, because it's no longer something that she can't escape the moment she steps outside of her door. It's now inside of her home. And I noticed that you kind of even just moved very differently within the space after that scene. And so was that something, again, that you just very intrinsically felt different in that space once you put together that scene?
Sure. It's a great observation. Yes, without question. And again, I go back to the script and I go back to the director. When you're moving in a space, you can have a sense of freedom as you're moving within the space, and the director will say, well, here's my idea of where she might go. And then I'll say, well, what if I go over here and we see how she's relating to the space differently? And they'll say, okay, great, let's do that. And then let's have you go over and around here. So it's really, if you're working well and you're working on a project that you have really available people, you're it's tactile and intrinsic, to use your word, among all of you. So yes, definitely. And we talk about that, but it goes back to, how do we express this story? How are we telling this story from an emotional point of view? That's what pulls people in. It's the energy that they feel. The storytelling is coming through in an emotional way.
Yeah. And with that emotional way that the story is being conveyed, it's really this study of these two characters who are going through a massive trauma in their lives, and they're in the midst of it when we're watching them and observing them and seeing their lives. Did you find yourself doing any research into kind of what that trauma would be like from an experience like that, particularly for people who had just kind of lived in a small community, not really kind of put themselves in any sort of public spaces before, and suddenly had this massive media attention, you know, and in the way that it was? Or did you just find that it was something that was just naturally there in the character and in the scripts, in understanding the trauma side of it all?
I think both. I mean, if you watch what's happening in our world and you see what's happening to people in their lives in small communities, people who don't go out or put themselves out in some way, they have very simple lives. I don't know that we pay enough attention to what those people, what they go through. You know, we're in the world and we're out and we're doing things, but many people have these very tender, either painful or thoughtful or traumatic experiences. And we hear a lot about that. We read a lot about that. You know, there's a lot on the news, and but so all of it's combined. And I think, I really do believe that as an actor or producer or storyteller, artistic in whatever way, the more exposure you have to all kinds of stories in the world, the more you're able to have that in your cell level memory, that you can bring that about. And if you have compassion and empathy and understanding, you can, all of a sudden it recalls something, and something comes out, and you bring this other, I don't know, I guess tenderness is the word. And also, I mean, all the experiences that I've had of things that have been either traumatic or painful, or starting my life over again, or reinventing myself in some way. It's not the same as their story by any means. And I wouldn't even assume to say that. But I understand what turmoil is, or painful experiences are. loss would be. Certainly not in the same way as them. I mean, people still think that Richard Jewell was the Atlanta bomber. And I think about that, and I think about what that must mean for Bobby in her life, that he was the savior. He saved people's lives, and all he wanted to do was make her proud. And I can empathize with what that must mean for her.
Yeah. Separately, there's a way that you've described that feeling of apprehension that you can have sometimes as an actor going into new performances, because, being an actor is all about being put into new places, new positions, new characters, and pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. But there's a way that you've described kind of taking that feeling and turning it into an excitement of like, I'm so excited to get to portray this character, to get to do this scene, to get to do this project. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about that journey of how you kind of figured out how to transition what could be a nervous energy into something that's a really positive aspect for you.
Oh God, you're so good. If you don't want to be stymied, and you would choose to give the best performance, it's not the performance, to be your best self going into an experience. If all you're doing is worrying about yourself, if all you're doing is worrying about your ego, like I said before, how you look, what your performance is, you'll always be apprehensive. And somebody once said to me, people are only apprehensive when they're trying to prove something. So stop trying to prove something. So I speak to myself. I talk to myself. Somebody, wonderful gentleman, said to me once, okay, you can be nervous and have butterflies in your stomach, but just make sure that they fly in formation. So it requires a contextual shift. And what I mean by that is you change the framework of the way you hold something. That doesn't mean you're not realistic. That doesn't mean you shove down your feelings and say, I don't feel this. I'm not feeling this. It's like, oh, give it space. I watch it and I say, oh, look at how I'm thinking about this. Now, is this valuable? Do I need to talk to other people to get support for this thing that I'm thinking and feeling? Am I making myself available to other people who are on the team when I go in there? Or am I just worrying about myself and focusing on myself? And that's all I'm thinking about. There's a different kind of awareness that comes in. And nervousness really is, somebody once said to me, only excitement. It's like, there's a reframing. So if you're not thinking about what the content is, like, oh, I'm worried. Oh, I'm nervous. Oh I'm proving. Am I any good? Which is always one of those actor things. It's like, you know what? You got the job. You're good. You're good enough, or you're good enough. And you know what? If you look from the spaceship aerial view from the stars, and you look back at our world, and you see that we are this tiny speck, and it's this thing that we blow up and make everything so big. It's not really. And so a new framework, a new watching, a new seeing can transform that experience.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us today and talking about both of these incredible projects. Thank you so much, Judith.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it.